Hi, we wanted to provide you with an update about LimaCharlie. We've deployed about 4 months ago now into general availability, and I think a lot has happened, and we wanted to communicate a bit better with our users and give a little bit of feedback and give some ideas about how exactly LimaCharlie is evolving. What are the big milestones we've accomplished and where we're heading to in the future. So it's been about 4 months in general availability. We're over 100 different organizations that are enrolled in LimaCharlie.io across 5 different data centers. Coming up soon will also be a new data center in Zurich in Switzerland. Whenever Google Cloud data centers become available there. So 100 different organizations, many terabytes of data have been exchanged and forwarded to our customers. So we're generally speaking pretty happy about kind of the progress that we've been doing in getting a lot of people onboarded onto LimaCharlie.io. So one of the things that I just mentioned around the Google Cloud, so one of the big moves that we've done in the past 4 months has been to move from Docker Swarm into Google Cloud Platform. So that's a fairly technical description of the move, but we used to be on DigitalOcean cloud providers, and we've moved to Google Kubernetes Engine on the Google Cloud Platform. And really moving into the entire GCP ecosystem has been very, very valuable to us. It's allowed us to really move from a reliable platform to really a reliable platform that pretty much runs itself, is very stable, and more importantly, that we feel is going to scale very easily in the future as we get more and more larger customers, which is obviously in the plans. When we did the move, as I said, we used to be on DigitalOcean. We looked into moving to a few various platforms. Obviously, AWS was one of those. We ended up settling on Google Cloud Platform simply because the ecosystem was a bit more complete for us. The whole life cycle was very easy to move into. And especially in terms of getting a lot of reliability metrics, as well as handling of incidents and all these things. They have data centers across the world, so we've been able to reshape a bit the various data centers that used to be specified as cities on the DigitalOcean realm and move them into geographical regions. So for example, our Amsterdam data center became the Europe data center. So we've had to change things a little bit around, but I think we're now in a much better position than we were when we launched into general availability. So that's really what's been happening with our infrastructure. I think we're in a good state now. Feature-wise, there's been a lot of changes as well. So obviously, the first thing that comes to our mind in terms of features are not necessarily the most glamorous ones, but in terms of output, we've added a lot of output. So when we say outputs, we're referring obviously to how we forward users' data coming in from their machines to our cloud into their own environment. So into, for example, Amazon S3 or SFTP or things like that. So we started with a fairly good list of outputs. And what we've done is we've really received some good feedback from some customers. And we've tried to add some outputs and implement them in a way that would be usable for, across multiple different usage types. So the big ones that come to mind are, for example, SMTP. And so SMTP was not really an obvious one to us initially because, sending emails, is not very good for high throughput. However, what we found is that some of our customers want to receive alerts into their SIM or their various queuing systems, and very often using email to receive those is a very good mechanism. So we've added an SMTP output for that purpose specifically. Along the same lines were the webhooks. So again, webhooks, it was not very intuitive for us, again, because it's not very well suited for high throughput, which usually is what EDR events look like. However, when you take a step back and start looking at the various ecosystems of larger companies or MSSPs, virtual SOCs, it starts to make a lot more sense, because sometimes some of our customers had very specific requirements that they really wanted to be able to control themselves. And specifically, they wanted to be able to leverage products like Amazon AWS Lambdas or Google Cloud Functions to be able to receive specifically alerts from our cloud, apply their own transformation, perhaps credentials, things like that, very customized infrastructure, and then forward to their own infrastructure. So adding the webhooks along with kind of the authentication that goes around them, signing of the webhooks and all of that, has been a pretty big milestone. Again, that's not very glamorous, but I think in the long run it's going to really pay off, because it enables a lot of types of integration and operationalization of LimaCharlie into existing security infrastructures. And that is a huge emphasis of ours. I think security as sometimes an issue where we have a lot of intelligence, we have a lot of theoretical data, but we have a lot of difficulty in actually operationalizing it. So taking the data, looking for example, IOCs for bad things like that, and to do that in a way that doesn't require a human to be sitting at a keyboard and doing all these things manually. Other outputs that we've added, I think another big one has been Google Cloud Storage. So much like Amazon S3, which we shipped initially with, Google Cloud Storage, same concept. Some of our customers have preferred when they're in the GCP environment to use that. And I think S3 remains one of our most popular outputs as well, because it's easy for customers to scale with, and it's easy for us to push in a scalable way as well. So everybody's a winner. Beyond the outputs, what are the other milestones that we've been adding? So I think another one of the emphasis that we try to make when we look at what are the next things that we want to make the platform progress, we always have this duality of do we want to make things easier, and usually easier for beginners through the platform, or do we want to add to the tremendous power that the platform has? But obviously the trade-off is that it's not as easy to leverage these complex features. So that's really a core question that we're kind of always asking ourselves. And we try obviously to have some good balance between them. On the easy side of the spectrum, one of the things that we've actually just released has been the detection and response GUI, or the wizard, or the simple mode. And what that was really the result of an experimentation and a thought process for us. So the DNR rules, the detection and response rules, very simply, if you're not yet familiar with it, it's the serverless rules, much like I mentioned AWS Lambdas or Google Cloud Functions, a very similar concept that we allow through our clouds, that allow you to define in a fairly easy way in YAML or JSON a rule of what's bad behavior and a response to that rule. So think maybe you're aware of IFTTT, and those rules are extremely powerful. However, what we've realized is that they're really not that easy to get into. Initially, our efforts were really geared towards creating a GUI, so user interface, that would make the creation of those potentially very complex rules Easy. So where it would be visual. So, adding various modules, and, there's logic in those rules, and plugging into various APIs that we do internally. So, there's an extreme amount of power there, and we thought that we would have a GUI that would allow you to leverage all of this power. And I think what we've realized is that our efforts would be better spent initially, not necessarily looking at that layer, but rather to say, what we want to do is we want to make it easier for people to get into the DNR rules. We still firmly believe that ultimately they're not that complicated. However, it's not like riding a bike that most people have ridden a bike before. So we need to get people used to thinking in that way. I mean, there's not a lot of equivalent of DNR rules on the market that allow you to, in real time detect various things from your sensors, do things like tag them, interact with APIs, and respond in real time. So we know it's not an intuitive thing. So instead, what we did is exactly that. So we created a simple mode for the DNR rules. And what the simple mode does is it makes it easy to take care of kind of the basic scenarios that we expect new users will want to do with those rules. And what that boils down to is IOCs. So indicators of compromise. I mean, in our industry, it's very common. And they are these kind of atomic indicators, right? So here's a hash and it's bad, or here's a domain name and it's bad, an IP or a file name. So those are extremely common use cases, and they're also, the simplest of those use cases. So we've created a UI that makes it extremely easy to select, the type of IOC, just put them in a text field, and then finalize this by checking a box into, what's the response that we want for those. And the response are the common ones, report a detection, kill the related process, or isolate the host. Those are really kind of the three big ones. And so we've built that UI, and that UI then generates the YAML, so the actual full rules for you. So we think that's going to be a good stepping stone that will help users really get into the creation of those rules, and to really start leveraging that power. And it'll make it easier for them to kind of go from a very simple list of IOCs and to see what the rules look like, and to just gain an immediate insight into, oh yeah, of course, that's how those rules work. So this UI is very simple to begin with. A couple of types of IOCs. We absolutely expect that we'll be adding on to the future to it. But we're really waiting to get some thorough feedback from some of our users to help us guide where that should go, which direction. Perhaps it's the original direction of having a UI for the complex rules. So we're waiting to see. In the opposite direction of all of this is the power of the platform. So we did not want to go kind of all the way into the path of the common denominator, because we do very strongly believe that we have the most powerful platform to do these serverless rules, and so we wanted to keep pushing that boundary and to make things more and more things possible. So along those lines, as we've made VirusTotal accessible as an API in those rules. And so, there's a lot more engineering work that goes, behind the scenes to be able to get to a point where we can do that with user-supplied keys. But it's the kind of feature that's a force multiplier, because in and of themselves, that API will not solve all of your security problems. However, when a user starts combining them with detections that they're already looking at, they are able to start getting a much better picture, build extremely reliable rules and things like that. Another one of those complex APIs has been the geolocation API, to be able to allow our users to create rules that leverage the IP geolocation of their assets. So to be able to say that, you know, the CEO is working out of the United States, and if the CEO logs into a box that is geolocated outside of the country, well, maybe somebody, you know, should get some kind of alert about that to validate that it's not a compromised account, for example. So those are, you know, I think a fairly good description of where we've gone with a lot of the engineering work that goes into really, you know, first-class features of the platform. The other side of the equation, however, is the side where we get users using the APIs to our platform, and we strongly believe that it's equally important to the first-class features. Essentially, what we're saying is that because we have such an emphasis on users integrating within the platform and leveraging a lot of that power, we need to make sure that this integration is extremely easy and works well and is rich. And so we've put a lot of effort as well on the Python APIs, and to a lesser extent, the JavaScript APIs. On the Python side is where we've really added a lot of meat around creating the command line interface, which allows users to not only interoperate with the platform from a security standpoint of you know, creating detections and things like that, but also from a management standpoint. We wanted to keep adding more and more quality of life features like output and detection and response rule syncing right in the command line interface. So that would allow especially large organizations or MSSPs to start managing their LimaCharlie deployment, you know, like industry best practices, meaning with configuration stored in as configuration files in a stateless way, that they would be able to, you know, create a new LC organization and mirror their configurations through it. So we've put quite a bit of work there as well. And I'm happy to say that the Python API is in a really, really good state. The JavaScript API, we've received a bit less requests around it. It also obviously is less geared towards being able to use it from the command line, you know, on the Linux host. So we've kind of kept it to the minimal feature set that we've used through a couple of our experiments that are available to users. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. Those APIs feed well into the operationalization that I mentioned at the very beginning. So as one of our big emphasis, we've produced a feature that we call the spot check through the Python API. And that was one of our big ways to help fairly early SOCs go from a list of indicator of compromise into automating a fleet check or a spot check, essentially looking through an entire company, through an entire organization for those IOCs. And we wanted to be able to give this you know, very simple utility that would leverage a lot of power for the user. So it's a very simple utility that is entirely, you know, based on the command line. So generating a command line is very easy. Adding indicators, specifying a couple of, you know, if you want a couple of kind of environment specifications, like, you know, how quickly to scan, these kinds of things, and to get at the end of this a machine readable output from the scan of the infrastructure. And we wanted to do that in a way that would scale well. And what that means is, you know, we did not want to produce kind of a third almost third-party utility that doesn't really fit with anything else we've done. But rather, we wanted this to use 100% of the APIs that we provide that are available to customers. And it almost works as well into a good example code for a lot of the users and organizations that are higher on the maturity level and that want to begin creating those integrations themselves. Finally, we have created a few experiments, and particularly what I'm referring to is Digger. So Digger is this tool that's available through our web UI, but it's actually entirely separate from the main LimaCharlie.io interface. And that's really on purpose. We want Digger to serve a couple of different purposes. So the first one is for us to experiment with various higher-end features that kind of cross the boundary between the platform, data analysis, and visualization. Obviously, our approach is the elastic EDR, and we are not looking into getting into the visualization space. But what we found is a lot of our users had a lot of capabilities, but wanted to get a better idea right away of how they could do some of the visualization. Obviously, as the creators of LimaCharlie, we knew the data set very well, and so we had some good ideas. And that's really why we created the Digger. So that's why it has right now two main interfaces at the moment: visualization of events and relationship between the events, and a console. And these are implemented in a way that is completely disconnected from LimaCharlie.io, meaning it's a web app where we don't store your credentials, we don't do any of that. And the advantage of this is that it means that it's fairly easy for a user to take it as it is, use the code, tweak the code, decide the types of changes that they want to do, or extract specific features, and use them, in their own portal. For example, some MSSPs want to create their own dashboards that are fairly feature-rich. And so for us, that's a way of demonstrating how this is possible using mainly the JavaScript API and then directly, of course, the REST API. So Digger is very much an experimentation. Interestingly enough, we found that it's a very fruitful implementation where we've been using it ourselves quite a bit to navigate the data sets and as we test various features or demo various things. But we want to keep the Digger in a semi-separate state, again, to maintain kind of these advantages I just mentioned. And our plan is to, in the long run, start extracting some of the gold nuggets from it and implementing those in our main LimaCharlie.io interface. Obviously, this is not something that's simple or that should be taken lightly. The last thing we want to do is to replicate kind of the legacy EDR approach of the kitchen sink. We're going to create this humongous monstrosity of products put together, and that you're forced into this ecosystem to leverage our things. So we really want to keep our what's in our DNA and what we strongly feel about what LimaCharlie.io should be, the elastic EDR, so the concept of where AWS came from and Google Cloud Platform came from, and not kind of the legacy large clunky EDR thing. So those are the reasonings behind Digger. We fully encourage you to go and try it, and please give us feedback. It's very appreciated, and it also directly feeds into not only what Digger is going to be, but also the APIs, the platform, and everything else that goes into it. I wanted to finish this discussion with a request for potential partners. So where that's coming from is that we've been doing more experimentation than just Digger. We see the EDR space as much bigger than what it is right now. And therefore, we've been running internal experiments in two main categories. First one is on Chrome. So we are looking into our implementation of LimaCharlie as an EDR, as a single platform. So not, a third-party clunky thing, but really as a first-class EDR agent to run as a Chrome extension, to give the users intelligence on exactly what's happening in the browser. Browsers are becoming more and more feature-rich, complex. A lot of things are happening within the browser that's really nearly impossible to get from the outside. And so we want to instrument it like an EDR. And as a side effect of this is to gain one more platform as well. And that other platform is Chrome OS. So we have this experimentation that will also provide us access to be an EDR on Chrome OS. The second experiment that we've been running internally is one around IoT. So the Internet of Things, if you're in security, it's likely nothing new to you that a lot is happening in the Internet of Things and a lot of very scary things happening in that space. Given that LimaCharlie is a first-class citizen within Linux, meaning we're not talking about kind of a one-off code base that's the ugly step cousin that doesn't work so well, but it's really a first-class EDR, the same EDR that's running on all of the platforms. We feel that we're in a fairly unique position to be creating LimaCharlie in the environment of IoT. Obviously, IoT is a very large umbrella term. And we're talking about a lot of different architectures, a lot of different platforms, different types of devices, usage, connectivity, all of these issues. But we feel it's a very important experimentation on our side. So we are actively looking for partners. We would love to partner with organizations that have either large Chrome OS or just Chrome as a default browser, a managed version of Chrome, in order to provide you with the EDR in Chrome, get some feedback, and really enhance the product in that way. And in a very, very similar fashion, to do the same thing in the IoT space. If you have a large IoT deployment or creating various IoT products, LimaCharlie is an extremely extremely good fit for an industry like that, because we take the AWS EC2 approach of being a middleware in all of this. So we're not strongly GUI based and things like that, which kind of philosophically works very well within the IoT space. So if you're developing a product, deployments, things like that, and you'd be interested into looking into LimaCharlie or having an EDR in that space, or telemetry even in that space. So perhaps it's not specifically EDR, but more around getting security telemetry, operations, things like that. Let us know. We would be thrilled to work with you on that. So that wraps it up. That has been about 4 months of LimaCharlie. A lot of growth. We're extremely excited about this. A lot more customers coming in on board, a lot larger deployments, and we will see what all of this brings. So thank you for listening, and we'll keep in touch.